The Gary Murphy cold case assassination ate at me for 22 years. As a licensed private investigator in California for more than 2 decades, I'm used to a high-volume workload. I churn through the files without sentiment. I run a business. Reflecting on messy, haunting, tragic cases doesn't pay the bills. I had tailed Murphy in the winter of 1998. Yes, surveillance. My client, a grandmother of his 6-year-old daughter, and Murphy fought for custody of the girl. The girl's mother had died of a methadone overdose in 1992. The grandmother had told me she blamed Murphy for her daughter's death, though Murphy had not actually been with her when she overdosed. My then client also told me that Murphy, a 3-time convicted felon and player in the San Francisco drug scene, was not fit to be a parent. 3 months before his assassination, a partner and I fired Grandma as a client because of her temper and erratic behavior. Even at the time, I wondered if I worked for the wrong person. What if the 41-year-old Murphy, an independent biker, really was trying to turn his life around, as court documents and witnesses said? But just as plausible, what if Murphy's criminal past had caught up to him? Could he have been a police informant? These 2 possibilities captivated me. Maybe there are more angles, such as money. Did the grandmother benefit financially from a lawsuit over her daughter's death since she became the little girl's legal guardian? Was he killed because he might have incriminating information about her? As a former crime reporter for daily newspapers, I saw that the Gary Murphy case sizzled. I have recently obtained information that names the prime suspects in the murder. But for whatever reasons, this murder seems to neither resonate with the public nor with the San Francisco police and prosecutors. This crime predated social media, and maybe the victim, to the masses, was unsympathetic. I feel torment about a man so terrified after being shot twice in the back that he jumped through a 2nd-floor window trying to escape. He died a brutal death 2 blocks from the ocean in a quiet San Francisco neighborhood in the outer Sunset District. He was forever deprived of being more of a father to that little girl. I'm sure his death not only devastated his daughter, but also crushed his siblings, parents, and friends. As I explored in the first episode, this case gnaws at me for its unfairness and injustice. This is America, land of 2nd, 3rd, and 4th acts, and reinvention. Gary Murphy, the son of a World War II hero father, didn't get to make amends in life. People close to Murphy in family law court records showed his top priority before his death was to become a full-time father to his 6-year-old daughter, Eden. The heavily tattooed Boston area native had been clean and sober for about a year, managed the halfway house where he lived, and counseled other parolees about fatherhood and staying drug-free. In their brief time together, his daughter remembered good times with her father.
I know anytime I was with him, I always felt really special, and he paid a whole lot of attention to me and made sure I was always happy and doing something fun.
Upon learning of Murphy's murder, my associate and I gave statements to San Francisco police detectives. They separated us at the Hall of Justice. We each gave a recorded statement. When you tell the truth, you don't need to practice. Your account just comes out as it did that day for each of us. We told detectives that the grandmother had paid us $12,000 cash in a Ritz Crackers box, pulled from a refrigerator, for trying to find information that would violate Murphy's parole. She wanted him in trouble with the law again so she would have an easy path to full custody. If we accomplished the job, the grandma owed us another $8,000. For a daytime assassination dripping with intrigue, the case never generated media buzz. I had turned over my case file and tipped off investigative journalist A.C. Thompson, now of ProPublica, to the story he wrote in 2004 for the San Francisco Bay Guardian. Despite the spotlight from Thompson's in-depth reporting, the story once again stalled. Another virtual media blackout shrouded the case for the next 15 years. Everyone had forgotten about the killing except for maybe a few cops, Murphy's family and old friends, and me. Aging comes with reflection. I was 33 in 1998, full of piss and vinegar, but by 2019, life had slapped me around. Recently, my mom had died, and an older sister died at 61 of natural causes. I had also lost a few close friends, and even a beloved dog. Growing older also means caring less about who you might piss off. You become more of yourself. So, aware of my own mortality, I had decided to take one more crack at finding out about the cold case assassination of Gary Vincent Murphy. Maybe you wonder why I'm devoting my time and energy to a hoary murder mystery of a felon biker drug dealer. For starters, to say that Gary Murphy got a raw deal is a stupendous understatement. He died in the starkest terror. He knew what was happening, that he was mortally wounded. This podcast is not about justice for Gary Murphy because he's long gone. His only daughter, family, and friends deserve to know more. I want the San Francisco Police or San Francisco District Attorney's Office to account for possible errors in the investigation and to answer for why they didn't try harder to bring the killers to justice. I want my former client to know that I've been on to her since the day I read that brief article about the shooting death in June 1998. Yes, this is my revenge. She tried to use me and has used others for evil. This old saying might apply. Before you embark on a journey of revenge, dig 2 graves. A cold case suggests a whodunit, a mystery. Maybe this is not a cold case because police identified suspects in the days, weeks, and months after the hit. Maybe this is a justice system failure. Who's worse, the gunman and accomplices, or the one who masterminded and paid for the kill? The one who ordered the hit is worse, a coward who contracts out for murder. And has this killer or killers walked around free because of a criminal justice oversight? This podcast and investigation is a test for me, a personal challenge. Life is about wins and losses, right and wrong. You now know my motives and the questions I still have. I did not provide the address information to the former client about where Murphy was living at the time he was gunned down. I did not have that address in the 3800 block of Quintera when I had Murphy under surveillance. I did not provide any information that contributed to his killing. Last year, I told my part-time employee, Angela Rowan, to request information about the case from San Francisco Police. Like myself, Angela is a former newspaper reporter. We make a good team because we both know how to push for information. In a public records request, you don't have to identify your role in a case or the reason for the request. That's the whole point. It's supposed to be public. With some exceptions, such as, quote, active and ongoing investigation, the information should be released. I could argue that a 21-year-old cold case is neither active nor ongoing when the last time it was looked at was in 2014. Without disclosing her reasons for the requests or her connection to me, Angela asked for information. Police released to her a summary of the investigation and an overview of the attempt at resurrecting the case and charging the killer or killers in 2014. But ultimately, it was just a sad synopsis amounting to the San Francisco District Attorney chain of command not wanting to prosecute. It had the feel maybe of a department wanting to cover its ass. From the beginning, San Francisco Police gave Angela the runaround. The initial response was that, quote, all the files were purged. We thought that's a mighty strange answer for a homicide investigation. She then began calls, emails, and letters to the chief's office, legal records, and risk management. Finally, she requested information again to San Francisco Police Department, citing the San Francisco Sunshine Ordinance. Cold cases are not exempt from records being released. In her latest round of requests in July 2020, police have said coronavirus is preventing a timely response. To make it even more tantalizing, police have at times told her that they would be releasing more records in the case, but then make an excuse for not giving the records. A James Frugoli of Police Legal came close to releasing records, but then said he couldn't, according to Angela Rowan.
And there was also initially, Mr. Frugoli, or Officer Frugoli, was saying that he misunderstood. He was doing the wrong thing. He was preparing to give me all these documents. He was actually making copies in the office of the homicide unit, like the cold cases unit or division at SFPD, and was told, hey, you're doing it wrong. This is not the protocol. And this has to do a lot with the delay, too, of him not knowing what he could release to me, and then saying to me, I can't release these things to you, although I'm in contact with homicide and cold cases, and actually the guy who was on the case during the time, and he has to go through it, review it, redact the file, and we need to discuss what we can release to you. So just to summarize, a lot of the delay was Frugoli saying that he didn't understand what he was allowed to give me, and he had to consult with his supervisors.
Her last attempt at getting more records, she cited the local San Francisco Sunshine Ordinance, which covers San Francisco public records. Angela explains the most recent roadblock.
So that was the one where I mailed off to the DA's office and also to the judge, which we can talk about that later, Cynthia Lee, and to SFPD. And their response, and this was the latest one actually, was that due to the coronavirus, we can't respond in the required 10 days, and we'll get back to you on July 14th. And this is the last I've heard of them. And that response was sent July or June, end of June.
But let's discuss the big item police did release. It's why I named this episode a bombshell full of questions. I had shared the police memo with investigative reporter A.C. Thompson. I talked with him about the memo. So let me transition to really the crux of this matter. And I've thought about this case again for like 22 years. So last year, I don't know what the impetus was, but it was just like, I have a part-time investigator working for me, Angela Rowan, who's a very dogged person and reporter. And I just think, well, hey, let's see what Angela can get from San Francisco police. So I have Angela do a records request on Gary Murphy, because I think I maybe had done one before and didn't get anywhere. So I have Angela do this. And one day, Angela emails me, and I think I emailed it over to you too, an 8-page summary about the case that just completely sheds new light on it and really just confirms what I had kind of thought all along, that the prime suspect was my former client. And the papers she got, it's a summary of the case written by a guy named Wincoop, who I think might be a DA's investigator. And what it looks like is the cops had really zeroed in on a gunman pretty much the day after this killing occurred. And not only had they had that, but they had a lot of other, I'll just call it anecdotal evidence. So I'll just ask you, from the summary that I obtained, what did you think of that summary?
My mind was absolutely blown when I saw this. It was really remarkable. And it was really very, very compelling. I mean, the thing is that, look, when I looked at the document, and up top it says motive, child custody battle and revenge for death of suspect's daughter. I thought, wow, this was the theory that you had. This was the theory that I came to believe. And this was what the police at the time would not let on to at all. They would not say at all, hey, this is our theory. This is who we're looking at. And so my mind was definitely blown when I saw that. But the thing that was really crazy is that they had a name from the jump almost immediately and had somebody that identified the alleged shooter from the jump and other people that sort of corroborated different pieces of the story. And that they'd even gone and gotten the guy's house searched and turned up a gun and gotten him sent to prison on an unrelated illegal gun case. But the murder case had languished. And when I saw this, I thought, holy shit, there seems to me to be enough evidence to push this forward. And they've been sitting on it all this time.
This episode highlights the differences between what we think we know about police investigations based on TV, movies, pop culture, and the reality of making a successful case for an arrest. And beyond arresting someone, there is that high bar of not only charging the crime, but then the battle to earn a conviction at trial or a plea deal. I feel a massive letdown. Even though I'm sophisticated about the courts and criminal justice, been working in it and on the edges of it for more than 3 decades, I expected more from a police investigation and out of prosecutors. I think in sports terms, maybe police had the ball down at the 2-yard line, going in for the score. What happened? Fumble? Wrong play call? I don't mean to be flippant in talking about a murder as a sports metaphor. I'm struggling for the right analogy. We have been conditioned to romanticize and think of police and prosecutors as superhumans. However, they face numerous obstacles to not only charge but to get a conviction. They are often overworked civil servants. Time and caseloads are the enemy. Or was it adequate to detectives and prosecutors that some suspects went to prison for a long time for unrelated cases? Hey, can't win them all, but maybe in a broad sense, that's a form of justice. Time for the nitty-gritty. I will go into detail about the possible gunman and some other potential suspects. From what I can glean, police had tips in the Murphy case both just days after the murder and 4 months after a notorious robbery and sexual assault of a pregnant woman in Piedmont, California, a small exclusive city surrounded by sprawling Oakland and just across the Bay Bridge from San Francisco. Some mansions in Piedmont look like they belong on Frat Row. Present-day Piedmont boasts networked police cameras and license plate readers at every entrance and exit to the city. Better technology and camera systems might have cracked the case then. Who knows? Even before the Piedmont tip, police seemed to be off to a good start. I have also decided that since none of these suspects was charged in the Murphy killing, I will not name them on this podcast. I know who they are and where they live, and I have seen numerous documents that detail their involvement in the crime. Legally, I could name them, but to avoid a possible legal mess, I won't. So in episode 1, called Gary and Grandma Bitter Enemies, I outlined the case, the main players, and my involvement as an indirect witness when I worked for Gary Murphy's adversary in the child custody case. I entered the case in the winter of 1998 as a newly minted private investigator. In the months before I met my client, the custody case raged. I did not know all the details at the time. Family law files showed Murphy taking the high road, not ever physically fighting back, but documenting to police and to the court how the grandmother threatened him and once threw a flower pot at him. They had mutual restraining orders against each other. Murphy had also brought up concerns in the court that he had witnessed marijuana growing outside at the property where his daughter stayed. He didn't like it that Grandma's son who lived there had a pit bull and owned a gun. Police at one point did remove the marijuana plants at the house, but Murphy always denied being the tipster. The more I have looked into my former client's background and into the victim's past, the more I think I worked for the wrong person. The former client, the grandmother, had a hair-trigger temper, and battled with multiple people, including a pharmacy and pharmacist she sued in connection with her daughter's methadone overdose, a daycare center over a payment issue, her estranged husband who had a restraining order against her, and with me. In 2020, she's back in court with a restraining order against her adult son. Journalist A.C. Thompson gave a summary of Grandma, the prime suspect.
For me, there were always two compelling pieces to this story. And one was the victim and his character. And like, you know, was this guy a dude who was really trying to pull his life together and then had it snuffed out before he could do that? And that seemed to be an interesting story. But the other thing that was super compelling about it was that the prime suspect in his murder did not seem to fit the typical profile. So you would think of Gary Murphy as being the guy who is likely to be the violent criminal. You know, he's a guy who ran with the Hells Angels, was super heavily tattooed, had been in the drug trade, looked pretty gnarly, and had done a bunch of prison time. But the person that seemed to be the prime suspect, who was quite possibly responsible for his murder, was a grandma. She was this affluent white lady grandma who seemed to live a fairly comfortable life in a nice neighborhood in Oakland, and was helping to raise her very young granddaughter. And her very young granddaughter was Gary Murphy's daughter. And the prime suspect's daughter had been Gary Murphy's wife or girlfriend, and had died of a drug overdose. And so here you had Grandma, possibly Grandma the killer, who had possibly hired a hitman to kill her daughter's ex. And then you had the victim, who's this gnarly biker guy. And it just seemed like a crazy, crazy story. And from what I remember, it seemed like, look, when people die violently, there's always suspicion, there's always rumors, there's always people say like, oh, well, here's the 5 people who would have had a reason to want that person dead. And generally that's just bullshit speculation. But when it came to the prime suspect, in this case, that person had what appeared to be a deep and abiding hatred for Gary Murphy, that she seemed to blame Gary Murphy for the overdose death of her daughter, seemed to blame Gary Murphy for the fact that she was now a grandma who was raising a very young daughter, and seemed to be not right in the head, that she seemed to be someone who, the prime suspect seemed to be someone that was constantly having absolutely crazy interactions with other people, did not get along well with others, did not play well with others. So, you know, she had allegedly threatened to do great harm to her ex-husband. She had allegedly threatened to do great harm to somebody that ran a preschool, and had allegedly left a voodoo doll for the preschool manager and basically threatened that person, and seemed to be just off the hook crazy.
I have also covered and probed whether Murphy could have been a confidential informant, maybe leading to his murder. I spoke with journalist A.C. Thompson, who wrote an expose on the case in 2004 for the San Francisco Bay Guardian. In 2004, not surprisingly, San Francisco police would not confirm or deny Murphy being a possible snitch. But Thompson checked with multiple sources, including a judge, a prosecutor, a former Murphy defense attorney, and associates of Murphy's, and all were unanimous. Murphy was never an informant. The close friends said he was too independent and just not want to cooperate with police and prosecutors. A.C. Thompson, for his article, had explored whether Murphy might have been a police informant. Ultimately, he didn't think so.
When I was talking to people at the Hall of Justice and people in law enforcement, they kept saying, like, look, this is the kind of thing that could be happening basically off the books, Gary working as an informant for the cops. You know, I talked to cops and said, look, I have off the books informants. I have informants that I work with that there is almost no record of how they work for the police. But as I pushed that theory around and I dug into it, I eventually started to think that that was probably not the case, that he probably was not working as an informant.
Until 2019, the case remained a dusty void, a black hole with no information entering or exiting. I had placed the odds of my former client having something to do with the killing at about 80%. She seemed to have the most motive at the time. Still, I had thought maybe a 1 in 5 chance of Murphy's criminal past plotting the hit. But after Angela obtained the old police memo about the case, I moved my former client's odds of hiring a gunman up to about 99%. I now know she had the criminal contacts, the savvy, and the propensity for hiring others to get what she wanted. I also have a copy of the search warrant that names the suspects and details what police hope to find. Here we go. Into the records of the police investigation. I'm giving a timeline from around the June 12, 1998 assassination. The information comes from a police report, a coroner's report, the 6-page police document we obtained, and various court records. As a private investigator, one aspect that jumps out in the police memo is lack of specific time elements. When was certain information obtained? What's left out is always important to investigators. The San Francisco police memo refers to witnesses with a capital W and numeral. So you have witnesses W1 through W4. It refers to suspects with a capital S and numeral. There are suspects S1, S2, and S3. A witness saw suspect 1, the gunman, and suspect 2, the driver, the day before the murder near the scene of the halfway house where Murphy worked and lived. The witness saw them in a bluish-gray car, possibly a Toyota. Witness 1, a resident of the halfway house, identified suspect 1 out of a photo lineup as the shooter. Wait! If police were showing suspect photos to a witness, that means they had at least one suspect very early on in the case. Continuing from the police memo. Witness 2 heard 3 shots and saw a black man running from the halfway house to a bluish-gray car with a driver in it. Witness 3 saw 2 black males pull up in a bluish-gray car a day before, about a block from the house, possibly in a 1980s Toyota Corolla. Here's another bomb from the memo. The car matched the description of a car that was sold by suspect 1 shortly after the murder. Again, police seemed locked on to the possible gunman, with a positive witness ID and info possibly linking him to the getaway car. But wait, there's more. Witness 4 told police that suspect 1, the gunman, had asked him for a ride to San Francisco. The gunman told him he had been paid by a woman named blacked out, to beat up a particular man who resided there. Witness 4 declined to give him a ride. Suspect 1 told Witness 4 things went wrong during the assault and that the victim had been shot and killed. Suspect 1, the gunman, told Witness 4 that Suspect 3 had paid him $12,000 for the assault. Stop. See the pattern? My former client, the grandmother, likely Suspect 3, not only hired people to do her dirty work, for me, surveillance on Murphy, but she also gave my former partner and me $12,000 cash to try to violate Murphy's parole. She would have given us another $8,000 had we been successful, but we canned her. Could it be a different woman also paying $12,000 cash? Impossible. Also, it's bullshit the plan had been to assault the victim. If that was true, why didn't she hire me and my associate to kneecap him? Disclaimer, we are not goons. Why bring a gun and shoot someone twice in the back from close range if it's supposed to be a muscle job? Maybe bring a baseball bat? And if it's supposed to be an assault, is the 5'4", 140-pound suspect going to overpower the 187-pound muscled biker at a house full of ex-convicts? The case grew stronger. The police memo said, Witness 4 picked suspects 1, the gunman, and suspect 2, presumably the driver, from photo spreads. To me, these facts suggest that Witness 4 had a prior relationship with suspects 1 and 2, but maybe didn't know the woman who hired them, whose name he gave, as well as he knew the 2 men. We have 2 independent witnesses, Witness 1 and Witness 4, picking out the gunman from photo lineups. 2 witnesses described the car. Police had also connected the shooter to selling the possible getaway car. Detectives hot on the trail. And police had 2 credible private investigators turning over case files and independently highlighting the anger and menacing behavior of the grandmother in the custody battle. They had motive. Police also could have accessed all the family law filings and restraining orders flying back and forth between my former client and Murphy. Witness 4 told the gunman's account of how the female suspect supposedly hired him for the job, claiming it was supposed to have been an assault. The summary says that the original detectives did 63 interviews on the case. My editorial aside is don't mistake activity for achievement. I have no idea on the quality of the interviews. Were they just checking boxes or were they driving the case forward? Thompson's article detailed that Murphy friends were either not interviewed or the interviews were cursory at best. The detective doing the summary, an Inspector Edward Wincoop, wrote that when he looked at the case, it was not summarized in a chronological report, and quote, many interviews had few, if any, investigative notes attached. The new detective wrote that he had to listen to the interview tapes, quote, to educate myself on their content. This reads to me like the detective division was unorganized and that the 2 original detectives possibly did not keep a detailed case file. It suggests sloppiness. The police memo writer seems to be pointing out problems without throwing the 2 former detectives under the bus. I'm sure there are directives, procedures, and protocols for how homicide case notes and files are supposed to be maintained through the years. The memo next goes into some evidentiary shortcomings and possible forensic evidence flaws and delays. Gunshot residue, or GSR, swabs were collected from Witness 4 the day of the homicide but not processed. The detective who wrote the memo, Wincoop, said that he submitted the GSR to the lab but does not say what the results were. Again, there's no chronology in the memo. Was Wincoop submitting testing from 1998 evidence in 2012 or 2014? That's not good. The memo said that detectives Camilleri and Casillas prepared and served multiple search warrants, telephone records, and firearms evidence back in 1998. Casillas, in the 2004 interview with A.C. Thompson, cryptically referred to, quote, evidentiary hurdles in the Murphy investigation but offered no specifics. Did Casillas know in 2004 the case had no prosecution potential? Why not come clean and tell the journalist about the missing pieces? Ballistics and phone evidence are crucial in any prosecution. The phone calls could show who was in touch with who, and maybe even the phones and phone company cell towers could give up the location of the phones on the day in question. But the original detectives, or perhaps the San Francisco Police Detective Division, didn't apparently keep or preserve telephone call information. Of course, 1998 would have been in the early days of cell phone forensic evidence. The memo from many years later said, quote, I conducted a search of all the telephone records obtained by Camilleri and Casillas, but was unable to locate any electronic records. I telephoned the server and was advised that the records were no longer available. My opinion? Police failed to preserve potentially critical phone evidence, and the memo buries the fact in a long paragraph. If they still had the evidence, Why was another detective 14 years later trying to contact the phone company for the records? Witness 4 in the memo seems to be an informant. He knew a lot of details about the plot and the circumstances leading up to the assassination. Who knows? Maybe he had even been at the scene. After all, he had been given a gunshot residue test the day of the homicide. Reinforcing the sloppiness theme, police in the memo they released to my assistant neglected at the end to black out the shooter's last name. They gave me his last name by mistake. I figured out the name anyway doing database searches for the address where the warrant was served, coming up with names of past occupants, and then running a few of those names through the Alameda County Court's criminal index system. I did find the shooter's full name and found his extensive criminal history. By the way, he's a free man now. He recently moved out of state from the Bay Area. I'm perplexed about there being no resolution in the case, because in the months after the murder, police sure had out the dragnet. Police served a search warrant in October 1998 at a house in Oakland where the gunman had lived. The memo stated that numerous agencies assisted in the case, including the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, RCMP, and the FBI. Remember, my former client has dual citizenship in Canada. On June 19, 1998, a week after Murphy's killing, a Piedmont woman 7 months pregnant was beaten and sexually assaulted by a man posing as a flower delivery person. She later gave birth to a healthy baby. Police had no suspects until after a $50,000 reward was offered. A man who had planned the crime and who was present in the assault was dumb enough to call police under a fake name, Frank, and give up the name of his accomplice. Police caught the tipster by lifting his fingerprint off a gas station payphone. The tipster also gave information about a San Francisco homicide, presumably that of Gary Murphy. By the way, no media or reporter has made public the connection between the Murphy murder and the much higher profile Piedmont home invasion. This podcast is the first to discuss this connection. According to news articles, the Piedmont case tipster and an accomplice hatched the plan to rob the woman after the tipster saw her at the Sawmill Furniture Store on Broadway in Oakland, close to Piedmont. They saw her diamond watch and decided to rob her. The one suspect dressed in a delivery uniform and took flowers to the house on Highland Avenue at 8:20 a.m. The pregnant victim was signing for the bouquet when the man burst inside with the gun. According to court documents, the tipster and the gunman in the Murphy case also took part in the home invasion. San Francisco police first contacted the gunman's parole officer in October 1998. They wanted to search his residence off 98th Avenue in Oakland in connection with the San Francisco murder. The gunman had downplayed to the parole officer that he had moved in with his then-girlfriend at the home. Out of fear the suspect might be armed, police had called him into the parole office while a throng of detectives served the search warrant on October 28, 1998. The two men later convicted for the woman's robbery and assault independently named the Murphy gunman as having conspired with them to commit the home invasion and being present in the attack. The one suspect, according to court records, named him as the trigger man in a murder for hire in San Francisco. My hunch is that witness 4 in the San Francisco police summary memo and the man named in court record statement of facts are the same man. The two, or rather the one, are right in the middle of having knowledge of both cases. He's the tipster who went by Frank who got caught. Police lifted his print from the payphone, then recovered jewelry at his residence taken from the Piedmont victim's home. He provided, quote, Detectives from the San Francisco Police Department with several unpublicized details regarding the murder which proved to be true and were consistent with their investigation. He also indicated that he was present when the gunman accidentally discharged the murder weapon into the floor of the gunman's home before the Murphy killing. The home invasion suspect then told police, quote, they would find a hole in the living room floor and a slug from the murder weapon underneath the house. This is where I get confused. There seem to be two time periods for information coming to San Francisco police. In the days and week after the murder, I think they had the identity of the gunman, and they certainly had Grandma's information that my associate and I had provided. But then, on dates not provided, they get the detailed information about the gunman from the home invasion suspects. So why wait until October 28, 1998 to serve a warrant at the gunman's house? That's 4.5 months after Murphy's fatal shooting. A lot of evidence and people can be disappeared, destroyed, and moved around in 4.5 months. It's also enough time for memories to erode and to shift, or for suspects to concoct alibis. In my investigation on and off the past year, I almost forgot that I have some information from the actual search warrant of the time. I had instructed Angela, my assistant, to ask the San Francisco police and the judge for a copy of the warrant, but they never responded. To be thorough, I had also asked her to request the Alameda County District Attorney's Office for what they had on the Murphy case. The Alameda County DA was more forthcoming than San Francisco authorities. The search warrant was served on Cary Court in Oakland, which is Alameda County, down off 98th Avenue. San Francisco Judge Cynthia Lee signed the warrant on October 27, 1998. The Alameda DA's response gave us what's known as the, quote, return to search warrant, or what was taken from the house. There is no narrative about why the items were requested. It's still eye-popping. Investigators took from the home one bullet-damaged carpet from the living room, one silver Derringer, a phone book, papers, a plaid shirt, phone bills, a Toshiba laptop, a pager, 3 rolls of film, and 1 box of 38 caliber Remington bullets. What's significant about the search warrant is it full-on names the grandmother, my former client, and her then ex-convict boyfriend without their names being blacked out. Detectives had independently from me and my partner learned the name of Grandma's ex-con boyfriend at the time. We didn't know it or give it to them. Police were looking in the gunman's residence for any documents and phone numbers, indicia, photographs, memoranda connecting him to Grandma and her boyfriend. However, I don't know what was in those film rolls, on that computer, on the pager, or in the phone bills. Police also looked for items with the name of the gunman on it and with the names of the other suspect in the Piedmont home invasion. They hunted for a purple or blue plaid shirt, dark pants, and dark gloves. I can only surmise that's what witnesses said the killer wore. Police found items in the house, including the phone bill and address book, in his name, indicating that he lived there. The box of the Remington 38 caliber ammunition was located on a shelf in the closet off the master bedroom. The firearm, a 2-shot 38 caliber Derringer handgun, was retrieved from under the mattress of the bed in the master bedroom. Murphy had been hit twice, remember. Could that Derringer have been the murder weapon? The girlfriend of the suspected gunman would later tell detectives that the suspect had been living with her in the home for the last several months. Police set up wiretaps at Santa Rita Jail, Alameda County's main lockup, for calls between the suspect and the girlfriend. I do not know if the Murphy case ever came up in those phone calls. The Murphy gunman and the 2 others in the Piedmont home invasion were the worst of the worst in terms of criminal offenders, much worse than Murphy's rap sheet. One of the Piedmont robbery sex assault suspects, also linked to the Murphy case, committed other armed robberies in June 1998. The gunman was convicted of possession of a firearm from the parole search, but nothing having to do with Murphy's case. His conviction history stretched back to 1977 for crimes such as burglary of an occupied dwelling, burglary, another conviction of burglary of occupied dwelling, harboring a criminal, receiving stolen property, and robbery. He did several stretches in state prison. In 2001, while still in custody, he was sentenced to 15 years in state prison. He appealed on various items connected to the search and his trial, but lost. With his release imminent, San Francisco police reviewed the case, but the DA declined to charge, stating that the Murphy killing was a, quote, one-witness case. Obviously, it was not just a one-witness case. I've made it abundantly clear that there were multiple sources pointing at the Murphy killer, the mastermind, and possible accomplices. Maybe the most violent of the group is who I will call Suspect 2, the possible getaway driver in the Murphy case and the lead bad guy in the Piedmont home invasion and sex assault, the man who posed as the flower delivery man. After both cases, he fled to Florida, where he was arrested October 21st. Working at a Texaco in Jacksonville. He was also wanted for armed robberies in Oakland and San Leandro, including bank robbery. His other felonies dated back to 1985. In October 2000, he was convicted in the Piedmont home invasion and sentenced to 93 years to life. He's still in prison. One article said he had tied up the pregnant woman, assaulted her with a Worcestershire sauce bottle, and threatened to kill her 2 children who were in the basement during the attack. The failed tipster in the Piedmont case, who himself was involved in the home invasion, was charged with residential robbery, possession of stolen property, and use of a firearm. A furniture salesman, he had a previous conviction in state prison bounce in Marin County for burglary and another receiving stolen property case out of nearby Contra Costa County for possession of stolen property. Based on database searches, it looks like he did about 5 years in prison after the conviction in 2000. I believe he was also the witness in the Murphy case who told detectives the details about the gun being fired into the floor and the gunman asking him for a ride to San Francisco. He was probably the first to lawyer up in the Piedmont case and appears to have had the lightest sentence, a typical reward of the first to rat. My former client's boyfriend at the time was also a San Quentin State Prison alum. In fact, he had a 31-year period of various state prison stints and parole time between 1980 and 2011. His convictions include at least 5 different times for vehicle theft. He was a San Quentin club member, in and out 5 times. I uncovered this detail. The Murphy gunman and Grandma's former boyfriend did time together at San Quentin in 1990 and 1991. Is that the connection to the Murphy assassination? Who knows? My former client, if she put together the assassination and paid for it, and I'm pretty sure she did, was perhaps smart enough to operate on the fringes of the ex-cons. However, when she dealt with me and my former partner Nazarian, she was not all that discreet. If she told the 2 of us she was capable of having drugs planted on Gary Murphy, she was capable of telling at least 2 very bad men that she wanted him murdered and would pay for it. If she paid us $12,000 cash, she would pay an ex-con $12,000 cash for murder, just as the San Francisco police memo said. I have a ton of questions. I have reached out to the lead detective on the case then, Casillas, but no response. I'd ask him, what about ballistics? Where were the rounds and casings located? In the body or elsewhere at the scene? Were they compared to the derringer and ammunition recovered in search of the gunman's residence? Was there a bullet pulled out of or under the floor of where witness 4 said the gunman had fired it at the residence on Cody Court in Oakland? How about the car, the blue-gray Toyota? Was it linked to the murder? Was it found and inspected? Whose fingerprints were found in it? What about other evidence or indicia in the vehicle? Why the wait? You had the possible suspect or suspects in the days or weeks after the murder, but a warrant wasn't served until 4.5 months later. Did you specifically question the gunman, the grandma, and her boyfriend about the murder? When? What happened? They lawyer up? Didn't try to find them? Why not prepare a search warrant for Grandma's house in Piedmont? Maybe they did. I don't know. What were the specific efforts about obtaining landline and cell phone records of the 4 or more suspects? What did the phone records show? Why weren't the records preserved? Were there any deals made to any of the suspects? As in, we will give you X years in Murphy or Piedmont home invasion if you give us Grandma for the Murphy murder. Were there conflicts between police and prosecutors about convictions in the Piedmont pregnant woman home invasion sex assault case versus trying to get a conviction in the murder of the biker ex-con Gary Murphy in San Francisco? Did her case take more priority over his? How many meetings did you have with the prosecutors from either Alameda or the San Francisco DA's office about the case? Do you have notes or emails from them about these meetings? I could go on and on with the questions. I'm cynical, but maybe the DA dismissing it as a, quote, one-witness case is another way of avoiding talking about detective and prosecutorial deficiencies. Perhaps one-witness case is code for bowing out of something that takes too much work or has other problems you don't want to disclose. In 2014, the San Francisco homicide inspector Wynn Coop had an arrest warrant and prosecution package prepared for the gunman in the Murphy case, who was about to get out of prison for the gun possession conviction. Wynn Coop's work went up the chain of command in the DA's office before being told by San Francisco DA Diana Garcia that they would not be filing because it was, quote, a one-witness case, according to the Wynn Coop memo. Did the DAs have access to the full police case files? The memo reads like the San Francisco District Attorney's Office did not want any part in fighting to convict Murphy's killers. Out of curiosity, I ran the memo by a couple of retired homicide investigators from big city police departments. One scoffed at the idea that it was a one-witness case. He pointed out the memo that had witnesses 1 through 4, enough to bring charges. Quote, it's a ground ball, he said, terming it routine enough to make an arrest and to prosecute. Another retired detective took a more reserved approach. He said the quality of eyewitness identification is the issue. If that witness is not 100%, then a DA will not want to bring the case to trial. He also brought up the potential messy issues in dealing with informants if a case goes to trial. Again, I'd point out that in addition to witness 1, a halfway resident who picked the shooter out of a photo lineup, police and the DA had a second ID witness, but who packed even more of a punch. Witness 4, the likely tipster and a perpetrator in the Piedmont home invasion case, provided intimate details of the shooter and about a woman who paid the shooter $12,000 cash for the murder. Though the shooter told the tipster it was somehow an assault gone wrong. The tipster gave police specific information about the gunman shooting the weapon into the floor of his residence, a detail among others that turned out to be true. Not only did the tipster know the plot, but my former associate and I confirmed to detectives that Grandma maybe had the most motive of anyone to kill Gary Vincent Murphy. I think we know why Grandma didn't get questioned, or maybe she didn't come under intense scrutiny in the beginning. She took off back to Canada, pronto, for the next 6 years. I asked Eden, Murphy's daughter, about what she remembered about moving back to Canada when she was a little girl. What was it like after your dad's passing? You're a very young girl, so you're 6 years old. What were those next, where did you grow up then? Did you guys go back to Canada, or what was that sort of age 6 to age 12 like?
So we, all of a sudden, I think it was in the middle of first it would have been in the middle of first grade or just at the beginning of first grade, I think it was. We all of a sudden were moving to Canada, and we were packing up the house, and we had left really quickly, and then I spent the rest until I was in sixth grade. So I completed elementary school in Canada and British Columbia.
Did your grandmother ever explain, like, why the need to go to Canada, kind of in a hurry?
No, she just said that she wanted to move there and because we have family there or something, and no one really talked to me a whole lot about it. I don't think I was my questions were taken seriously, or my concern, or, I think it was I just thought because we had family or something, I didn't, think too much about it.
Yeah, you're a kid.
Yeah, I think I was mostly concerned about, I was probably asking more questions about, like, when will I see my friends again, and, that kind of stuff.
In lawyer language, the grandma moving back to Canada for several years after the murder could be interpreted as consciousness of guilt. And speaking of consciousness of guilt, as you know from episode 1, the grandma's side of the family kept Eden in the dark about not only her father not being around, but anything about him being murdered. She was 16 in 2008 when a friend told her about the San Francisco Bay Guardian article by A.C. Thompson. She told me she cut out the article, left it on her grandmother's pillow, and moved out of the house. And here I am, back to ground zero almost, still full of questions. I've covered a lot of ground, but I'm not satisfied. What was it about this case that created such an apparent lukewarm response from not only the police and the district attorney's office, but from the media and the public? I asked reporter Thompson why he thought the case and the investigation just fizzled out. It's curious. So I think one of the questions that has to be asked, and there's a lot of possibilities, is did this case go nowhere because of maybe a lax police investigation? Did it go nowhere because of a DEA's office that wasn't terribly interested or didn't think that they could get a conviction? Or maybe this is just how the criminal justice world works, and not every case measures up to a prosecution, and that's just how it goes. This is not TV.
Yeah, it's so interesting to try to figure out, and it's hard to tell from the information that's there. Clearly, though, part of the problem here is that Gary Murphy did not have a fan club. He did not have people out there in the world saying, make an arrest in the killing of Gary Murphy. We loved him. He was a brother. He was a father. He was a friend. Make the arrest. We are outraged. Something needs to happen. Obviously the people that I talked to and people you talked to said that quietly, but they didn't have clout in the city. They were not in the media. They were not, mounting a pressure campaign for the police to catch this hitman and whoever hired the hitman. And that, I think, was absolutely a problem. There were two things going on at that time as well. And maybe you've done some research on this, but one, the clearance rates for homicides in San Francisco were just generally bad. Generally, the police department was not great at solving homicides unless there was an informant or a really obvious eyewitness identification. And then when things passed over to the prosecutor's office, to the district attorney's office, they were not very good at successfully prosecuting homicides. And they were dinged in the media for both of these, the police and the prosecutors. It's hard not to think that there was that perhaps what happened. I guess what I should say is it's easy to believe that prosecutors might have felt like this is not an easy case. It's going to be a hard case. we'd like to have some more evidence, and said, given that, and given the fact that there isn't a lot of outrage about this murder, maybe we'll move on to other cases that might be easier to put together.
There are a couple of interesting footnotes. In February 1998, a young assistant district attorney from Alameda County was recruited over to the San Francisco District Attorney's Office to supervise the Career Criminal Division. She went on to become the San Francisco DA from 2004 to 2011. You know her as Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. I have a hunch the Murphy case crossed her desk. Another tidbit is that the SFDA who dubbed the Murphy murder prosecution insufficient, a one-witness case, Diana Garcia, was the losing prosecutor in the murder of Kate Steinle. In a nationally debated Sanctuary City case in 2017, a jury found a Mexican man not guilty of tourist Steinle's 2015 shooting death. I expect to do another episode, but at this point I need new material. I need answers from both former police investigators and district attorneys, as well as from possible suspects in the case. If you know anything about this case, or about Gary Vincent Murphy, call or text me, Mike Spencer, at 510-593-3767. Everything will be confidential. My final thoughts for the episode are San Francisco Police and the San Francisco District Attorney owe a full explanation to Gary Murphy's family and daughter about why no one was ever arrested or charged in his murder. They have let at least one murderer escape justice. Thanks again to all who have helped. Engineer Brian Kranz, my assistant Angela Rowan, Cusick and Cusick Investigations of British Columbia, and Chris Oprisco, who did the theme music.